All right, shows we are recording.
Okay. We call the meeting to order. Any comments from citizens present? Anyone who would like to speak?
Hi, this is Dave Lorman.
Hi, Dave.
I sent a letter to Dan Ramsey. I asked him to, I guess, present my ideas and thoughts regarding the ordinance on motorized toys and vehicles.
Yeah.
Apparently he's not here, so I don't know.
No, Dan's not going to be able to join us tonight. So I didn't know that they had a letter from him. He didn't mention anything.
Yeah.
Would you be, do you want to present, or do you want to wait till Dan's here next month and then we could talk about the ordinance at that time? I hate to keep putting it off, but.
No, I mean, I guess then my only question is, what are your plans with the ordinance tonight? Otherwise, I would present what I have, or I can wait and let Dan look it over.
Were you able to look in the packet? What Attorney Matt Fleming had drafted an ordinance, and had you had a chance to look at it at all?
I went online and I could not figure that out for the life of me because I couldn't find the packet, and so I would have read. I clicked on. I'm on the website, and I guess for the life of me, I saw the agenda packet, and when I clicked on that, I guess it wasn't displaying all the information as I
It's yeah, if you don't click on the one that's, if it's not the PDF and just the agenda, then you can click on the items and get to the documents.
Okay, well, so.
And you can't get to them through the PDF unless you scroll through it.
Okay. I can review it while you have the rest of your meeting and then add my comments if you let me do it later. Sure.
Okay.
How's that sound?
That sounds fine. That sounds fine.
Okay, thanks.
Okay. Okay, we're going to move up the item. Let's see. It's under review. Does that discuss the consistencies between terms and city committees under miscellaneous number 3? Larry would like to take that.
Thank you. This topic is one I started researching several years ago on my own and quickly grew completely frustrated because I didn't know where it was going to go. But just for the committee's benefit, the issue I was looking at was how are city committees and commissions constituted? Are all their terms properly staggered? And who does the appointment? The mayor, the council, the mayor approved by the council, or what? And what I found was a lot of difference in various ordinances. We're not going to do anything today, but at least I'm going to give you some citations so you can take a look at them yourself. So, for example, and I just did this in the order the ordinances appear in the City Code of Ordinances. For the Water Resource Management Commission, section 2.05 sub 2 sub C says there are 3-year terms for commissioners. You're appointed by the mayor. No reference to council approval.
Okay.
The chair is appointed by the mayor, not by the committee. I doubt that's the actual practice. That's what the ordinance says.
Okay.
Plan 2.06. Of course, as you know, the alder member is elected by a 2/3 vote of the council. That's statutory, so that isn't a particularly big deal. But for citizen members, it simply says they are appointed by the mayor, no reference to council approval. And of course, the mayor is chair. Board of review, 2.07, the members are appointed by the mayor subject to council approval, says nothing on how the chair is selected.
Okay.
2.08, the members are appointed by the mayor, no reference to council approval, no reference to how the chair is selected. Public Works, 2.09, the alder is appointed by the mayor, subject to council approval. The citizens are appointed by the mayor, no reference to council approval, and it's silent on how the chair is selected. Park Recreation Forestry Commission, 2.10. The alder member is appointed by the mayor, subject to the council approval. The citizens are also the same way, appointed by the mayor, subject to council approval. No reference on how the chair is selected. Library board is like the PRFC, 2.11. The members are appointed by the mayor, confirmed council, no reference to chair. I take that back. The library board does explicitly get the ability to appoint its own president, not chair. CDA, 2.12. Members are appointed by the mayor to 4-year terms, subject to council approval. Even, and of course there are alder members there, which 4-year term doesn't make sense because an alder may not still be on the council 4 years after he or she is appointed.
That's a 1 year, it should be 1 year term. And it lists 2 of them and it's never had two alders on it.
Well, I'm just telling you what the ordinance says.
Yeah.
This is why it gets confusing. Youth Commission, 2.14. All members are appointed by a mayor subject to council approval. The Youth Commission selects its own officers. At least it says something. Pleasant View Golf Course Committee. And by this time, Matt and I are working on these, so you can blame us if it's not good. The mayor is a member. The alder is appointed by the mayor. The citizens are appointed by the mayor. No reference to council approval. And the committee selects the chair from its members. Conservancy Lands Commission, 2.16. Many of the members are automatically appointed due to being members of other committees, which is fine. That's how it should be. Chair is selected by the members of the committee. Airport Commission, this is one of the craziest ones. It basically, this is 2.18. It says nothing on how the members are selected. Although there is a reference to the initial appointments being staggered, but it doesn't say, does the council select them? Does the mayor select them? Mayor approved by the council, which of course is the practice, and the commission selects its own chair. Then, the normal council committees, very, very simple. This is 1.04. The mayor appoints the members subject to the approval of the council. And the mayor designates the chairs of all standing committees, and all our appointments are subject to confirmation by the council. So, my sense is that that's not a good way to run a railroad. What we ought to do is standardize the method of appointment where there is not a good reason to do it a different way. So again, as noted, Conservancy Lands has a separate rule for appointment. I'm not suggesting changing that. And my goal here is just to make it easier to understand so the ordinances actually are consistent with the practice, as opposed to throwing the baby out with the bathwater and just starting over. But if I had a goal, it would be, 1, all of these ordinances, or one general ordinance that replaces all of these procedures, says that all members of committees or commissions, other than alders, are appointed for a 3-year term. We'll stagger them, so there's 1 being appointed every year or 2 being appointed every year. They're all appointed by the mayor, subject to approval of the council. I don't care what we do with chairs, but I would think that the better way to do it would be to let the committees themselves select their chairs because they know better on what's going on the committees. But that's just a personal opinion, you know. So I'm just telling you all this now. I know you can't, you're just hearing this all for the first time. I'm not suggesting you're going to have a good idea what to do, but I think if you could get a chance to review the ordinances and look at the crazy patchwork of how things are being done now, which is basically just an accident of history. Each of these committees were created separately. It would appear that whoever did it, and I may have written some of these, didn't pay much attention to how some of the other committees had been formed. So we have this inconsistent arrangement. You may have a better idea. My goal here is to come up with something that you think is good. And with that, I'm done for now, open for discussion.
I did contact Lori Burns, and I did get a list of all the different committees. And you're right, there are, the terms and the dates are not staggered consistently. You may have 4 or 5 that are 1 year, 2 the next, 1 the next, and then, so there, and I can understand how that happens if people resign and other people come on, and it just goes that way. But it's a good time to clean all that up. We do have some student members they're asking for now, which would make sense to have those be 1-year terms because they are students, and you know that may their lives change quickly. So they have that on sustainability, and on workforce housing they ask for it. So and library is a little different also, isn't it, with how they operate? I've also looked at different ordinances. A lot of them say that they'd have to be a citizen, citizen of the, you know, a citizen eligible to vote within the city of Middleton.
That's another issue.
Yeah.
I became aware of this issue during the time of Mayor Sonnentag. And, you know, I'm just an advisor. The council can do with appointments as it wishes, but I was surprised to see the number of non-residents who got appointed to city committees and commissions, you know, simply because, of course, they may have interesting input. It's probably good on that level. But if they're making recommendations on how to spend city money, that might not be the best way to do things. But so what we have now is, you know, and I'm not criticizing, I'm just observing. We have the second mayor in a row who is basically appointing based on applications, regardless of where they come from. And if the goal is to confine some or even all committees to residents, that would be an appropriate topic for an ordinance.
Well, some of the committees have some that actually just say mayor's designee instead of a citizen. So that might be an opportunity if there's like an expert. Let's take the water resource, for example. If there's somebody that lives outside that they want to appoint that may not live, it would be a mayoral designee. Yeah,
Yeah, we have a few committees. I know that we've specifically talked about that issue on some of the more recent ones, like Sustainability Committee and the Workforce Housing Committee. So yeah, I think the Workforce Housing Committee is the last one we created, and there we specifically referenced that reasonable efforts should be made to appoint a citizen member, but we recognized that there was certain expertise that we wanted on that committee that, you know, may not be confined to, we might not be able to get a resident. And so we kind of put a little more weight on getting expertise there than residency. So
Matt, was that the other way though, that we said it would be nice to have these people with this experience, but that's not necessary, that it didn't say whether we'd rather have the experience or the residency. So
right. So, I mean, I think probably the one area where most of these should probably be consistent, except where, like Plan Commission, where you've got certain statutory things that, you know, we really can't vary from. But the thing probably that should be most consistent around is being clear. I would think most things should be, you know, mayoral appointment subject to council
Exactly, yeah,
approval.
that's true.
There may be some even exceptions though to that, but that should generally be the rule in my view.
Okay. Well, we're not going to solve anything tonight. Larry, do you want to take a stab at putting something together, and I can review the terms to see where there's where they're not aligned correctly, or how would you?
Yeah.
How should we proceed?
I could do that if you want me to do that, sure.
Katie, what do you?
Yeah, I'm happy to. Do you want me to help put that together, or do you want to
No.
just?
Is that the track you feel comfortable taking? Is having Larry draft something and I can review and then we can bring it back to the next meeting?
Yeah, I think a general ordinance sounds like a good idea. And if there are exceptions, then I think that needs to be dealt with on a case-by-case basis. I feel like a general ordinance would be a very nice place to start.
Absolutely. So do we have to have a motion to do this, or just to
No,
work on it and come back? Okay.
no, I'm just looking for your guidance, and you know, if you think of anything before it's drafted, just let me know. And if there are things in particular you're interested in seeing, give me a holler. I'll try to
Okay,
react.
that sounds great. Thank you, Larry.
Thanks, Larry.
Thank you. I'm over and out.
Okay. Now, I don't see Mark Opitz on here. Is anybody else on for the, Adam is. Adam
Yeah.
Warner.
Yeah, Mark, I just texted Mark. He should jump on shortly.
Okay, all right. So we could start. Do we want approval of the minutes for the May 12th, 2020 meeting?
I move that we approve them.
I'll second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Oh, just motion carries. Minutes are approved. License and permits. Review of alcohol license renewal held by Middleton Sport Pool LLC, doing business as Middleton Sport Pool, 6815 University Avenue, James Brown, Wanakee, Wisconsin, as agent.
I'll just jump in here real quick. The only change on this from the last month was that the agent was not changed at the request of the Helen Brands. And in the packet, of course, is the letters of support that City Attorney Fleming had provided us to take a look at. So,
I have a question on their renewal application. On theirs, it's item number 6A and B. It said if either of those are checked yes, explained fully on page 3, and there wasn't a page 3.
Right.
I wonder, so that probably was in the original one, but it was on the back of a.
I looked on last month's meeting and I didn't see it.
Interesting. Okay. Well, I have it.
Oh, you do? Okay.
I do. I don't know how much you guys are able to see, but
no, okay, that's kind of that's what I looked on for the form to see what kind of information. It's just basically saying which laws are yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So
they do have it completed. Yeah.
So this is filled out by Dudley, but not Sherry. So I don't know how that applies.
All right. Just as long as they do have it, and it'll be on file as part of the.
Matt, do you have anything to add to this?
Not really. I mean, just to give you just a quick review, I probably could have, and maybe should have included also my memo back from August of last year when we just went over some of the new changes to the law in terms of what we can consider. So, you know, I think as I've indicated before, under prior law, I think our hands would be more or less tied here, unfortunately, in being able to do anything with this license. But now, since last year, we're required to consider a bit more. Actually, this was adopted back in April of 2018, so for the last 2 years, really, to consider broader evidence of rehabilitation. Now, in this case, a lot of the factors don't really apply here because just due to the way the case has been handled and because there are other defendants involved and a lot of other factors. Although they have been convicted, they have not yet been sentenced, but they have certainly entered their plea and were cooperative from the get-go. But a lot of the things regarding completing a sentence, probation, all those kinds of things just wouldn't apply here because they haven't even actually been sentenced yet. So really that gets us down to a list of 6 factors to consider. They are evidence of the nature and seriousness of the offense, evidence of all circumstances related to the offense, including mitigating circumstances or social conditions, the age of the individual at the time the offense was committed, the length of time that has elapsed since the offense was committed, letters of reference by person who have been in contact with the individual since the applicant's release. Again, they haven't gone to jail, and from what I understand, are unlikely to do so. But certainly, we have letters of reference since the conviction, and then F is all other relevant evidence of rehabilitation and present fitness presented. So here, I think to the extent we've got mitigating circumstances and evidence of rehabilitation, I think we are pretty well in E and F there, the letters of reference and all other relevant evidence. I would say, some of the others are really kind of seem to lean against granting the license here, such as, the age of the individual. This isn't, youthful indiscretion kind of a thing. The nature and seriousness of the offense. From my understanding, while it was a felony, I think all of tax issues like this are classified as felonies, and certainly this is among the lesser serious offenses in that universe of offenses. I would also note that I think, in my opinion, Wisconsin has somewhat of a odd stance on dealing with the video gambling machines, and they sort of occupy a sort of strange position within Wisconsin law that, while I don't necessarily think excuses what happens here, it does make it a little bit more unusual of a circumstance where Wisconsin basically has a system where we sort of look the other way as long as we collect the taxes on these sorts of things. And so they're but here, I think probably the most unusual situation and evidence of rehabilitation here is that we've got a situation where we have long-standing experience with the business, and that's what the letters of reference really focus mostly on, and all the other information we have. And that's probably the most unusual thing we've got here. Just because we don't have much to go on post conviction or anything like that. But certainly I think by all the evidence we have is that they were quick to address the problem. They've worked to pay back any taxes and have been cooperating as much as possible. So from that perspective, this does seem like sort of a outlying event. And so that would be the argument on the other side. But so this does leave the committee and ultimately the council a great deal of discretion to kind of weigh all these factors. And there's nothing in the statute that says any one of these particular factors have to be weighed more than the other, or you could determine that any one of these factors weighs much more heavily than the others. These are all just things you need to consider, but the weight you give to each one of them is entirely yours. But I would recommend, some discussion, and that we at least you know, if ultimately the decision is going to be denial, we need to provide ultimately something in writing detailing the reasons for denial. But I'd also recommend articulating, if you're going to recommend granting the license, articulating some of the reasons why you would want to grant it as well.
Okay. Here's my take on it, and I have not been a customer at Middleton Sport Bowl except for the pancake breakfast, and so I don't know Sherry or her husband, but I read the letters. Now we've heard from Sherry and her husband 3 meetings now, 3 months in a row. And from what I can tell, they are doing everything they can to rectify this issue. And they have, you know, this other person as the agent for their alcohol license, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm inclined to vote for it.
Is that your motion?
I would move that we approve this. I will make a motion. I will move that we approve this license renewal.
And I will second that. They've done everything we've asked to come back. They've provided letters of support. They've shown, I think that says a lot about their character, and they've been in the community a long time. I think this was a outlying incident that happened with them, and I would second that motion. Thank you. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries. Okay, I see Mark Opitz has
Thank
joined.
you very much.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Mark has joined the meeting, and I would like to take up the Good Neighbor Festival items, which appear to be under license and permits number 6 and 7. And under ordinances, I think the number 2 on the modified open container restrictions we've applied to Good Neighbor Fest also, and then the updates. So, Mark.
Well, actually, I defer. Thank you, Kathy. I defer to Adam since he applied for the permits, but I will make a general statement, and that is that we decided as a board last night to element the physical presence of this year's Good Neighbor Festival. Due to the pandemic and concerns about maximizing safety, and we felt it was the most responsible thing to do. We had a news release this afternoon to that effect. So that is unfortunately the decision that had to be made. It was a unanimous decision. We were all saddened by it, but you know, Adam here too. You know, in his many years with the festival, this hasn't happened, and no cancellations. So, Adam,
These are unprecedented times, yeah.
Yeah. We have some alternate ideas, but I want to, since this is a Adam agenda item initially, Adam, did you have anything you want to share with the?
No, I was just going to say, please withdraw our application for special events and for amplified sound. Since we're having a festival, we don't need them.
So what about this ordinance, modify open container restrictions? Was that mainly for the Good Neighbor Fest? It's number 2.
Yeah, it is something we crafted to deal with kind of the plan that had been discussed, although, you know, certainly there will be Good Neighbor festivals in the future, and I don't think that this is something that may necessarily be limited to Good Neighbor Fest. But I mean, any urgency in considering it, I think, is kind of taken off. But I think it has merit on its own, you know, on its own, if we want to still consider it.
And just so I understand, Adam involved in the ordinance, or was this, Matt, your initiative?
This is what, yeah, this is entirely what I came up with based on some of our earlier discussions and, you know, how I thought best to implement sort of the idea that you guys were talking about. But
Yeah, I mean, I think it makes, you mean the open concept, the open campus concept essentially is,
right.
I really think that's something that we want to lead with, have that option to do in the future. You look at how most other festivals in the area are run, and I'm thinking specifically of Taste of Madison concerts on the square, where there isn't a, it is not nearly as restricted in terms of, you know, defining a fenced-in enclosure for where you can consume beer and wine. And so I am hopeful that we can change how the model has been in the past. And I think the biggest concern is, you know, the nighttime crowd and the large crowd that assembles to make the festival different from the two that I just cited. You know, so the issue is making sure that the nighttime bands that we have, or band, as was the case this year, each night was going to, you know, making sure the crowd didn't get overserved, and it kept better handle on alcohol consumption where it was meant to be on the premises and not be taken off. But we had a plan that would have had a fence encircling the entire ground so that we would have been able to monitor that, if you will, just as well as under the original concept. I'm also, frankly, interested in this discussion as we look at the other parts, specifically the downtown plaza, but I think it would be better to discuss that with all the that's heard before we discuss that here. And what's before you is the Good Neighbor Festival concept, but it does, as you said, apply to other areas potentially as well.
Okay.
So
we will take off the item 6 and 7, and then we can talk about the ordinance item number 2 when we get to ordinances. So thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
And I want to thank you all for your support of our ideas. We met over the last half year or so a couple of times, and you've been very supportive of, and Jeremy has been a great resource, and I really appreciate that. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you. Okay. You know, the agenda gets shorter so quickly. Okay, number 2, application for special event permit by Classic Car Show. Noah Helbot, the contact person for the Classic Car Show on June 20th, 2020 in downtown Middleton. Noah?
Hi. So I was here last meeting, and I got tentative approval, and I had to change a few things on the application, and I resent the application, and we changed the time from to 8 to 2. It would only be 6 hours. Also, we changed the amount of cars, so we will only have 25 participants in the show. And we also changed the amount of people that we will be letting into the show.
I'm sorry, I'm having a hard time hearing you.
Okay, can you hear me now?
I can.
Yeah, better.
Better.
We also changed the amount of people that we're going to be letting into the show at a time. So we are going to have a volunteer team. There's about, well, including me, 5 of us. And we are going to be able to limit the amount in accordance to the phase 1 or phase 2 of the Madison social distancing orders. And we're only letting, I think it's either 50 or 100 people in the car show at one time, because we can't actually have more than that there. So we're going to be limiting it. And what we're also going to be doing is, well, this is an idea, I don't have it in the application, but I thought of it during the meeting, having some sort of arrows and saying it's like a walkthrough. So it's like an L shape. So we have an entrance and an exit. So we just say, hey guys, like as soon as you enter the show, you just walk through, you look at the cars, and then you exit on the other side. That way we don't have people congregating in one area. So yeah, if you have any questions.
I do. No, what do you mean letting in? Are the cars going to be, are people not going to be able to walk around freely? They're going to be gated in, or how? I guess I didn't understand the letting in part last time. Are people paying to see the cars? Can you hear me, Noah? Did we lose him?
Looks like he's kind of frozen there.
Kathy, am I wrong? Did you ever know about a letting?
I don't know how this works based on the map that we've seen. I have some questions on the map also. Noah, let us know. Are you back?
He just disappeared off of the screen, or my screen anyway. So it might be a minute or so.
It's really raining. I don't know if that affects anything, but should we move on?
Sure. Let's move on to, we'll come back to that when he, Jeremy, let us know if you see him there.
Yep, I will do.
Okay. Item number 3, Middleton Express LLC, doing business as Holiday Inn Express and Suites, is requesting a Class A fermented malt beverage and Class A cider licenses located at 8353 Murphy Drive, Middleton, Wisconsin, with Luke Stoffaker, 3 Cambridge Road, Madison, Wisconsin, as agent. Is anyone here to speak to that?
Does not look like it.
Okay.
Just the one thing I would say about this is they initially put in for a Class A liquor license. There are none available right now. So the application you're seeing appears, I did discuss with Lori. So if you look in the premise description, it talks about the sales of beer and wine. They cannot sell wine at this point because they will not have a Class A liquor license because there is not one available, a quota license.
Okay.
So they're aware of that, according to Lori, and that they will apply when there is one available. It looks like Noah's getting back on here. He's connecting, but so that just appears to be an oversight. The application is actually listed as a Class A beer and a Class A liquor. Noah, we'll be back with you in just a minute here.
Sorry about that.
No, that's right. So it is just for a Class A beer and Class A cider only at this point. And there's, from my background investigations, there's nothing.
Okay. I move that we approve this.
I will second that. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries to allow for the beverage permit. Okay, let's revisit number 2. Katie, you had some questions for Noah?
Yeah, no, I didn't understand where you said letting people in. Do people have to pay to get into the car show?
No. So I have a designated street closure, and that's where and then at the entrance on Hubbard and Parmenter, there's going to be a booth there for checking in people with cars, and that way people who are entering as guests from that direction.
Okay, you're kind of cutting in and out on us. I'm sorry. So, but if somebody wanted to just come in and shop, are you limiting how many people can come in?
No. And I don't think we can do that because there's quite a few entrances to that area. So that would be hard to do.
So how can you keep track of the number of people?
I mean, we won't be able to keep track of the amount of people in downtown Middleton. I don't think that's feasible.
So how can you say you're going to limit it to 50 people if it's phase 1, 100 people if it's phase 2?
For the walk that I had, it was just an idea for like the walk that I had.
Right, but people come in and they go to the restaurant here, restaurant there. You can't say 100 people in that area. Like you said, there's so many different places for them to come in.
Right. It's not possible to totally limit the amount of people. Just due to the fact that we can't stop people from entering downtown Middleton. So
correct. And that's part of I have a question for you. Looking through all the phases here, how are you classifying this event? There's a lot of different, you know, this is drive-ins or this is a restaurant. How are you classifying this event? So when you look at the metrics and what's going to be allowed.
I don't know, actually. I didn't know that there was a different classifications.
Well, there's mass gatherings, there's farmers markets, there's indoors, there's outdoors, there's religious events, there's all kinds of things. And this is a pretty important thing, is what metrics we're going to be following based on how this event is classified.
Okay, I don't know how it would be classified. It's a classic car show. However, that would be classified.
What I would guess based on this is classified as a mass gathering outdoors. So then we would look to what the social distancing requirements are for that. And I'd like to hear more about your plans on spacing the cars out. And also on your map, I'm a little confused with, I gotta get back to that screen. You have an area that reserved to cars, but booths for sponsors will set up here.
Oh, I need to take that off. That was an old map. I did want sponsors to sponsor the event and set up booths to promote their local businesses. But I thought that was probably not a good idea due to social distancing orders.
And also you have on here different businesses, and you also have on here, everything looks fine, but then there's it looks like where TDS is, Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints on there. Do you know anything why that would be there? Everything else looks very up to, I mean, you have Board and Brush, and these are all new businesses.
Yeah, I thought that was the TDS building. Am I wrong?
No, that would be the TDS building. But Noah, did you add any of that stuff other than the writing that you?
No, that was just a screenshot of the map from my computer.
Sure.
So I don't know. I think that was just Google Maps and putting those things in there.
Okay, because that just seems like a completely off the wall thing to show up down in downtown there.
Yeah, no.
25 cars. How much spacing can you allow between cars? It says right here, spacing between stations should be at least 15 feet.
Between what?
For social distancing, for gatherings that do occur, small group programming, spaces between stations or booths should be at least 15 feet.
Okay.
How would you do that with 25 cars in this area?
I don't know the exact measurements of that parking area, but it's 28 cars long, and we're going to be putting 20 cars. So I don't know if it's, I don't know either. I was looking and I was figuring out we can do 6. I was going off the basis of 6 feet between each car, and I was like, if we do less cars, we can do 6 feet between each car.
Well,
Are you doing 20 or 25? I wrote down 25 that you said earlier.
Yeah, 20 or 25.
You don't know?
I'll take what I can get. I have a lot of cars I could bring. A lot of people are showing interest, but
okay.
Another
thing that's required as part of these events, according to the phased plan, are written plans on how everything's going to be implemented. And I didn't see anything in the packet in writing on showing how you were going to maintain 50 people or 100 people based on which phase we are in. And it does say utilizing directional arrows is a good idea. That's one thing you had going for you, but based on the fact that it's going to be difficult to maintain or to even track how many people are in that area, I'm not convinced that you're showing that this can be done in a safe way, because people can come in from many different directions. They can come in and you think they're part of the car show, and they can go eat at a restaurant, and then you don't have a good track of how many people. I'm not supporting this at this point.
I mean, yeah, it would be hard to, you know, if people wanted to stop and look at the cars and then go to Village Green or, you know, Long Table, it is going to be hard to measure that. That being said, we can't limit the amount, we really can't limit the amount of people in downtown Middleton. Like on last weekend, I think there was way over 100 people down there.
Right. But you're asking for a special permit for an event, and we have to look at the event that you're asking for. And
yeah, mainly all I want is just to park 20 classic cars down on that road, 20 to 25 classic cars on that road, just, you know, to support the community. And I think it'd be a fun thing to do. I don't know why this is so hard to do.
We're in a pandemic now, and we're in a phased reopening, and we're trying to keep
I understand
public safe.
I understand that, and I'm all for that, and social distancing, keeping people safe.
And
but
I wouldn't want to.
I mean,
I wouldn't want to
all I'm
put a
asking
limit
for
on
is,
downtown if we're looking at. We want to get people down there to go to the restaurants and stuff, but this actually putting an event there is bringing in a whole host of restrictions at this time.
I think we can operate within the restrictions, respectfully.
What happens if you can't?
Good question. What does happen?
I don't know.
I mean, people are gathering in droves right now to go on protests for Black Lives Matter, and I totally support that. And I think there's more than 100 people doing that, and so this is going to be way less conspicuous.
I don't think that's what we're talking about at all. No.
No, I know, but I'm saying like.
And I'm not doing it because I'm not somebody that's going to go out and risk my health for this. Also,
that's to support, you know.
There are other businesses downtown that are still doing the curbside service and blocking parking spots downtown in that L-shaped area. You know, that the people are going to go somewhere, and I don't want to jeopardize their business for if they want to continue their curbside service either.
Most of those businesses support this idea, if not all of them.
The ones I talked to hadn't heard about it.
Okay, which businesses did you talk to? I've
talked to 2 downtown. They hadn't heard about it.
Okay.
The ones that you're in that L-shaped, I'm convinced you did talk to. Yes. I'm just saying that I'm not convinced that we can maintain the required numbers at this time.
Is that your motion?
I would make that motion that we deny this at this time until we don't have a good way to track the attendance. I haven't heard, I didn't hear from Noah a good way to track attendance.
I've heard that Cars on State is being canceled this year as well.
Yeah, that was June 13th was when it was happening.
Yeah.
I think they're turning it into a rally. Maybe that's the Iola Car Show.
Oof.
You know, last time we talked about moving into a place like in a different parking lot or something where you could be able to contain how many people are there. That wasn't, you want to keep it where the businesses are, and that is just not a good place to be able to track the attendees.
Yeah, I think I tend to agree with Kathy. If you could move it to the lot behind the library, you could still bring business down. People could come and go to lunch. People could go shopping and look at the cars and have a lot more space. It's an extraordinary time.
Yeah, it's interesting.
So Kathy, I'm seconding your motion.
Okay. Do we have any other discussion? Noah, do you have anything to add? Another thing that wasn't part of this discussion that I would have liked to have heard more about is like a sanitation station and things that are required. I just think that this has got to be fleshed out a lot further in order to make something like this happen at this time in this location. Okay, calling all in favor of denying the request for the special event for Classic Car Show? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Denied at this point. Okay, we'll go down to number 4. Application for a sidewalk cafe permit by Parmenter Freehouse LLC doing business as Freehouse Pub, 1902 Parmenter Street, Tim Thompson, Madison, Wisconsin, president.
Sorry, I wasn't unmuted there. Just real briefly, he was invited here. He didn't know if he'd be able to make it. It looks like he's not. But this was a permit. If you guys are not aware that Madison and a couple other local jurisdictions have waived the requirement for a sidewalk cafe permit to allow businesses to open with outdoor seating, which is easier to, in Tim's case, he said it would make it a lot easier to open his business back up and worthwhile. So that has been waived by the city administrator by approval of the mayor and council president through July 31st. I made contact with Tim and just asked him if he was going to be interested in keeping this sidewalk cafe, and which is he had to fill out this permit. He said yes, he would. So that's why we have it on the agenda here today. Personally, from the police department standpoint, we don't have any issues.
What you were referring to in Madison, didn't that go out into the street area also? This is only for sidewalks, so.
Yes, that is what I had read as well for Madison. This is specifically just within the requirements of our sidewalk cafe permit ordinance. Yes, so no street use.
And there's no, the diagram showed that everything was spaced 6 feet, the tables were for 4 people, less than 6. So I think this all looks like it's in order.
I think it's a great idea.
Yeah.
Businesses need to, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
I move that we approve this permit.
I second. Further discussion? None, all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Oh, good. Okay. Application for, number 5, application for outdoor amplified sound permit by Jennifer Cradwell for Kiva Sports Center, a commercial enterprise, 8312 for Cynthia Street, for a sound system, DJ, karaoke, and speeches and announcements from 8 a.m. to 1 a.m. May through October 2020.
Do you want to take the lead on this, Laura?
Sure, I can. So I've been chatting with Jennifer on this. It's their annual permit, and I mean, it's mainly for the sound that they have when they have their outdoor leagues, and that's how they determine the times that they wanted it.
Had they done this before for this block of dates? Is this the first time?
They have done it for the same amount of dates, I believe, but the times we have noticed have been a little extended from previous permits.
Okay, but they've done it for a block of months at a time.
Yeah, okay. Similar to like Capital Brewery.
Okay.
And just from the police department standpoint again, so I think, Laura, correct me if I'm wrong, the last one that you shared with me from it was filled out in 18/4/2019 was until midnight, correct?
Yes.
Okay, this one goes till 1 a.m., which is, I guess in my eyes, is pretty late compared to what the ordinance goes, which is 10 p.m., I believe. I'm trying to read this, 11. The decibel level decreases as the night goes on. Weekends are different compared to weekdays.
Oh my gosh, I didn't even notice that. I thought it was 8 in the morning to 1 in the afternoon.
Yeah, no, this is 1 a.m. So, right, and that's, some of the stuff they include is the speeches, announcements, karaoke. I don't know that they've ever done that outside. The sound system, I don't know. A lot of this stuff is, in fact, all of those selections, I believe, were consistent with what they had from the prior one. I don't know that they utilize all of those. A lot of those things, such as karaoke, a DJ, a sound system, sound more like something that would belong in a special event. But I do know that they play soccer outdoors pretty late, and along that same line, I'm not familiar with any issues that we have had with noise.
And
obviously, it's in a non-residential area, so.
Right. Yeah,
And you did say that they had it to 1 a.m. before,
It was midnight before,
midnight before.
correct?
I suspect there was a tie game at one point that went on and on.
It's possible. I know that Jennifer said the sand volleyball league usually wraps up around 12:30, again, till 30 in the morning. So I think that's why they went for the extension to 1 a.m.
Sure.
And it's all dependent upon reasonable.
Oh, shoot, hold on. I am sorry. Now I've got 2 phones here.
Everything noise related is still needs to be reasonable for any enforcement action. So if it's unreasonable, even inside their hours, it would be a citable offense as well. So.
Sure. I'd move that we approve this unless anybody else has any more discussion.
Okay. And they had no complaints on this before?
Nothing it's certainly nothing consistent, nothing that I am aware of, no.
Okay. All right, I'll second your motion, Katie. Any further discussion? Hearing none. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Okay, that motion carries. We're supposed to be answering that downstairs.
You're popular.
Okay, so let's move on to ordinances. Okay, Dave, you're still with us? David?
Yeah,
Okay.
yes.
And did you have
Thanks,
a chance to review it?
Yeah, I had a chance to review it. And basically I would ask that you consider the ordinance from 2 angles. One, dropping it completely in that, is there any history of any problems with any of these types of operating devices in the Conservancy? Has the police been involved? Have there ever been any citations, property damage, or any destruction to wildlife? That aside, the other piece of it is looking at it very specifically with respect to the operations of airplanes, helicopters, and drones. Now, the Federal Aviation Administration, the rule is called FAR 107, specifically allows the operation of motorized airplanes, helicopters, and drones pretty much anywhere over the US other than space that is controlled or regulated by the FAA. So for example, I was just looking at a map here for Middleton, and by the way, I'm a local pilot. I fly out of Memorial Airport. Our airspace in Middleton is called Class E, as in Echo. And so airspace that's Class E is managed. So anything that operates in that airspace has to have approval. Anything below the airspace is called Class G. Now, that airspace is unregulated. So for example, you could have in an aviation chart that you can't fly over a wilderness area or a wildlife area, which is pretty common. There are times where all aviation activity is simply prohibited over any kind of refuge and places like that. So with respect to the city of Madison and all the lands and conservancies, there's no restricted airspace above any of these properties. So the way your ordinance reads is, say, as a commercial operator, of a unmanned aircraft system I want to operate, it implies that I would have to first come to the ordinance committee and say, hey, look, we're being asked to do survey work, or a realtor's contacted me to do some photo shoots of a property. It could be any number of things where the craft is going to be required to operate. So this ordinance in some respects is operating outside the FAA rule, FAR Part 107. You can have your city attorney just look that up. So I guess what I'm saying is, you know, if you want to have an ordinance, but draft it appropriately to at least allow the use of what are called UAS, unmanned aircraft systems, so they can really just operate in accordance with the law and without ever having to even deal with the city or its ordinances. And if you want to ban the use of, I guess, other land-based or water-based devices in the conservancies, hey, have at it. But as far as the air above the land goes, it needs to reflect the rules appropriately.
I wondered about that also, about the airplane part of it and the helicopter. Most of the conservancies, don't they have like big tree cover? People wouldn't want to get too close to the treetops, would they, with those?
Oh, right. So common sense dictates that, you know, you can't go inside of a conservancy and start operating something that flies, because it's going to fly into the trees.
Yeah.
But you can very easily fly over the conservancy.
And
at a low altitude. So
right.
for example, as a pilot here in Middleton, we fly over the city at 1,000 feet above the ground. And law and common sense says you don't go below 1,000 feet. But also law says to us we can't go above another 300 feet above that, because that's Madison's controlled airspace. And the rules that have come into play for the UAS systems, they now all have to be registered. So even if a kid goes over to the local hobby shop and buys a radio controlled airplane, the fine print says, oh, by the way, you need to go to the FAA and actually register this as a flying unmanned aircraft. Now, whether that's happening or not, I can't say. The ones I have happen to be registered. And so, you know, and the whole reason behind it is really to promote responsible use of these radio-controlled aircraft. And believe you me, I want to see people use them responsibly, because I don't want people messing up the fun I have with them at our local parks and places like that, you know. So that's kind of where I'm coming from.
Jeremy, do you have the history on how this came before us?
So it was brought to us by, it was to me and Matt, I think it was by Susan West, based on a complaint about a toy boat in the pond, I believe, off of Frank Lloyd Wright. So that's how it all started, and then it was brought here. And correct me if I'm wrong, Matt.
Right. Yeah, that's what was the response. Yeah, this was the response to that complaint. So yeah, I don't know that. I don't recall if what we were told was that it was happening often, or, you know, a real isolated incident. I'd have to go back and see if that kind of detail was given to us.
Right.
But I think the feeling was that, well, even if it hadn't happened a great deal, it just was not something appropriate for the conservancy lands. As to the other comments, you know, I certainly agree that we'd have significant problems enforcing this by somebody who is physically outside of a conservancy, that might fly within the, you know, conservancy airspace, so to speak, as long as they're otherwise in conformity with federal regulations. And so, you know, whether we need a maybe specific language in there, including that it may not be a bad idea, just simply acknowledging that there is some limitation based on federal law. I don't think there's any problem with us enforcing it from the perspective of people physically being in the conservancy where they are operating it. But certainly, you know, as long as they aren't harassing anybody or anything like that, if somebody is physically outside of the conservancy and they are otherwise lawfully operating unmanned aerial vehicle, that probably cannot be prohibited. But that might be another specific, I mean, I think that's how we would interpret and enforce the ordinance, but I think it's a point well taken that perhaps we could and should explicitly acknowledge, you know, that there is a limitation there and where it wouldn't apply. So there isn't any question.
One of the other things that was brought up also was the potential harassment of wildlife in those ponds.
Yes, thank you.
Katie, I'd like your thoughts on birds and these helicopters, airplanes, drones and stuff. Do you think they would be disturbed by these, depending on where they are living? I mean, there's birds that nest on the ground and there's birds that nest in trees and.
Yeah, and as far as I'm concerned, that's a conservancy. That is a place set aside for the wildlife, and especially at certain times of the year, nesting, especially. A drone.
I would say, do you think dogs, do you think there's more dogs in the conservancy than there are motorized toys, boats, airplanes, and cars?
Dogs are not allowed off the trail. Dogs are supposed to be on a leash on the trail, and a gravel trail or a paved trail isn't typically where you're going to see a nest.
Mm-hmm.
So then a child could, say, be walking in the conservancy with their parents and have their, I don't know, their radio controlled car with them and just run it along the gravel trail without a problem.
I don't know. It says no motorized vehicles in the conservancy on the sign. But I do know that motorized scooters are allowed. So yeah, I mean, I don't like
e-bikes and
yeah.
Are they allowed?
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah, they are, because
And
I think anything we open as a bike trail by state law, we have to also allow those.
I don't like them because they can go 20 miles an hour down the trails when you've got tons of people, especially now, tons of people on the trail.
Yeah,
but they're allowed.
Well, one thing I was doing today, and I'd like to have, there's in the ordinance 21.03 conservancy land regulations. This is at the beginning of where it spells out conservancy lands, and it lists the conservancy areas, but it doesn't have a complete list. So I would like to, and I don't know, do I give these to you, Laura, on adding? It doesn't list the Middleton Hills Old Savannah or the Middleton Hills Ponds and Conservancies and stuff. How would we go about having these added? I ran it by Matt Amundsen. He said, yes, these areas should be added to this list. How would we get them? It says, but not limited to the following, but at least I think this would give some extra clarity to these areas are part of the stipulations that we're spelling out in these ordinances. Who would get this list so that we can make an adjustment to it, just including the other conservancy lands, areas that are listed in the parks website?
I would probably start with Lori.
Okay. Okay.
If
I can follow,
you would know.
Yeah, I can follow that up with Matt's email, because these are areas I think that have expanded since the ordinance was written, and they just haven't caught up with it. And since on this list, it didn't list like the Middleton Hills areas, I think that this would make it easier for enforcement. But the other thing I was thinking of, there's also on the parks website the different activities you can do in which parks. And maybe we want to add like Lakeview or was it Mendota that they could do motorized boats there to let people know they're not prohibited all places, but they are prohibited in conservancy areas.
Right.
Yeah, one of the things I'd comment, looking through the, I think it's called the Academy of Model Aeronautics. And one of the things they've kind of always advocated for is, well, if a city or municipality is going to adopt kind of a rule that says, hey, you can't do this for one group of people, but you can do something for another group of people, well, then you open up the whole door of saying, then how are you going to accommodate those people? So, yeah.
Yeah, but you can't drive down the sidewalk on your car either. So there's just certain things that you can't do in certain places, right? So my take is, why can't you fly your motorized helicopter or your toy airplane over Lake Mendota? What's wrong with going to Lake Mendota?
Well, you probably can, I would imagine, except, what park it would be. If you live in Middleton, why would you have to leave Middleton to go do something you want to do?
You don't. You go down Allen Boulevard to the park right there.
Sure. I would imagine if somebody wants to do that, they can. There wouldn't be any restriction on operating there in the park or in the water.
Sure.
And Lakeview as well.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I agree with you. I just think it's just always, my attitude in drafting anything like this, if everybody's miserable, then it's a win for everybody, because then nobody gets what they want, but everybody gets a little something. So,
No, we've worked really hard on these conservancies, and I'm not going to let this one go.
Well, I agree with you, but I just sometimes see some things that just become so frivolous. And, the thing is, if you're going to do something like this, you got to prove why. I mean, if there's no history of a boat or a car,
But we just proved that there is a history. There is a history.
No,
right?
There isn't. There's nothing
Yes,
on
there
file.
is.
The police.
The police
You're
were
telling me the police
called.
department has issued citations and you have it documented?
You have
That's
the
what-
history of a call.
There aren't
One
citations
call.
issued because it wasn't illegal until, that's why we have an ordinance.
Yeah, but
no,
so
there
you're
was, there was
drafting an ordinance over one telephone call?
I will do
No.
it.
See, that's an abuse of power as a member of a
No.
city.
It's
Why
protecting
should a member of a city be
conservancy.
able to bring up an ordinance and say, hey, I saw someone do this, I don't like it, so I'm going to make it happen? And why can't a citizen come along and say, look, I think it's overreach. Why don't you take a step back and let's really do something when there's a problem. Let's do something when we can prove that there's a problem, when we know that landing
How long
hurdles
do
are
we
being
have to
disrupted.
wait? How many phone calls are appropriate? How many are too many phone calls?
Well, just
Is it
like you were
17?
asking, just like
Is
you were
it
asking
30?
Noah that he needs to demonstrate, the reason why he wants a car show and all the things he's trying to do to make it safe. I think as a city, you have the same responsibility if you're going to draft an ordinance to say why, to prove it. You have to have proof. That's my point. Otherwise, it just becomes frivolous. And we can draft ordinances for everything before you know it.
I don't consider keeping the conservancies and the nesting birds in the conservancies safe frivolous.
I agree with you, but the thing is, where do you start drawing the line? Because, dogs are a problem in the conservancy. People don't keep them on leashes. And
it is a problem.
Yeah,
And there's
dogs,
an ordinance for that.
Yeah, but it's not, what I'm saying is, when's the last time you saw a motorized car, boat, or whatever in the conservancy versus a dog? Has anybody in this committee ever seen a motorized toy operating in the conservancy? And I'm asking the police officer, has he ever seen a motorized toy operating in our conservancy?
What I can tell you is that we've gotten the complaint. I bring this. the answer to easily answer your question, no, I am not aware of any of those.
Okay.
Service.
So that's my
Please
point.
let me finish, Mr. Lorman. Okay.
Oh, sure. Go
Okay.
ahead.
So what I'm saying though is that those are not easily patrolled lands either. So we do, you know, if we were going to do proactive patrols there, would we see it? I don't know. I honestly don't.
Sure.
I'm a facilitator in this group here, and I'm just
Yeah. I get
a
it.
consultant here. So
No, I'm just saying, you know, when there's a problem, fine, let's go after a problem and get it fixed. But just being frivolous, I think is really, because see, it's becoming complicated, because I'm not going to back down on my legal use of airspace over the city of Middleton for whatever I want to use it for, as long as I'm doing it within the boundaries of the law. And so I can assure you, if someone were to see a motorized aircraft, radio control, flying over the conservancy or near the edge of the conservancy, they might start getting pretty upset about it, and the next person might not even care about it. And so now here we have a document that gives someone some ground to stand on when we don't have the facts. And so you're just lumping all this stuff into it, boats and cars, and you know, you're just saying it's a motorized vehicle. So where do you draw the line? You know, you have to, there has to be a reasonable aspect to it. And that is, I get it. If it's a problem, we got to deal with it. I use the conservancy almost every day. I walk there, I exercise, ride a bicycle. I don't have a dog.
Okay,
You know?
got it.
Okay.
It's your opinion that it's frivolous. It's my,
and it's your opinion also. And just because you sit on the committee doesn't give you that power.
I'm going to talk as a committee member now.
Okay.
Drones are becoming more popular. Drones are becoming more easily obtained. I don't mind that this ordinance is being set up at this point.
Okay, that's fine, but then the ordinance has to be drafted to allow the operation of drones within the Federal Aviation Regulations, Part 107, which says I can fly over the conservancy all I want, all day long.
That's drones, but not the airplanes or helicopters, correct?
Sure, any unmanned aircraft system.
So it would include helicopters and airplanes and drones.
Absolutely.
Matt, what's your take on this?
Well, as I said before, he's probably correct. Now, but there is a distinction though between, we don't have to allow anybody to be themselves physically within the boundaries of the conservancy operating the drone. If they are outside the conservancy and they operate and the drone goes into conservancy airspace, provided that they're, you know, otherwise in conformity with federal regulations, he's correct. We can't prohibit that. I mean, although we could say, you know, we could say, essentially clarify in the ordinance that we recognize that there's this carve out, that it does not apply to prohibit you know, flight over from outside the conservancy, you know, provided that, you know, there's no harassment of animals or things like that.
Right.
Going on.
Okay.
You know, so
you can't even put that in there because, you know, you're not the one who gets to judge whether it's harassment. The law simply
I think that I disagree with. I think, I mean, I think in many cases it's going to be very difficult, but I think that I can imagine cases where it could be easily demonstrated that you are harassing animals. I think it would be tough to do from outside the conservancy too, but strictly theoretically speaking, I can conceive of circumstances where one could demonstrate that somebody operating a drone was harassing wildlife, and
sure.
and the FAA rules do not protect you from that. So
correct. So that's what I'm saying. If all you have to do is cite the FAA rules, you don't have to embellish them to the city of Middleton. Simply say that you know, UAS craft can be operated in Part 107 of FAR, and that's it. which allows operation over the conservancy.
So
So if you
Matt,
want, I can take this back to the drawing board and add that language and bring it back.
Yes,
Katie, are you okay
please.
with that? Okay,
Yes, please.
okay.
Well, then I guess I'd just like to go on record that I believe that the License and Ordinance Committee is really just being frivolous by including the rest of these operating devices in an ordinance when there's absolutely no proof of it taking place. And I think that's important to realize.
Okay. All right. Thank you, David. All right. Matt, you'll bring this back the next meeting. Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you. Okay. So ordinance number 2, an ordinance to amend section 7.08(88)I to modify open container restrictions for special events.
Did you see the note from Mark Opitz before he left?
No.
Says I need to go to the PC meeting, but I support the OA. I'm assuming that means ordinance amendment that modifies open container restrictions.
Yeah, like I indicated before, this, this was kind of, the genesis of this was to sort of accommodate Good Neighbor Festival, but it is not necessarily something that is, strictly speaking, a Good Neighbor Festival regulation. I don't think it really if any, it opens up our ability to consider some different things, but it doesn't really otherwise completely open the door to doing things in a totally different way. I mean, in reality, this is kind of really a minor tweak that gives us a little more flexibility. Whether we ever use it or not, I don't know, but.
Actually, this could, if they close down the area we were talking about earlier on Hubbard over to Elmwood on Aurora, around Stornhorse Green, that would totally change. This would come into play then, wouldn't it? With the bars there, that they could take open containers into the green. Right now we have it where you have to have closed containers.
No, because, well, first of all, this exception is solely for temporary Class B fermented malt beverage licenses. So it's not the people around the Stornhorse Green. That's a little different issue, and that's not really addressed by this. I mean, because they've got other issues. I mean, you can't leave a licensed premises with an open container, nor can you bring an open container and consume alcohol on a licensed premises that was purchased elsewhere. So there's still restrictions involved.
So this isn't saying you can take an open container to another location. I thought that's what they were trying to do at the.
Well, it is, but it is limited temporary Class B fermented malt beverage licenses. And the other issue here is that, although it's not expressly stated, because most special event permits are issued for public land, that's the other issue involved, where normally you cannot have a open container in a public place, but one of the exceptions is public parks. So, we would not typically issue the special event permit allowing something like this for any place other than in a public park, because you'd be taking things off of a licensed premise area, but you'd be essentially allowed to go into areas where you're possessing open containers where you're allowed to do it.
Okay. I'm inclined to table this until we need to do something with it.
Turn that into a motion.
I'm inclined to motion that. I'd motion that we just take, now I don't know exactly how this works, that we put something on the table if it comes back, or how.
Do you want to defer it, or do you want to table it? Tabling, I think, is more permanent, is it not?
Not necessarily. I mean, you just need a motion to take it from the table.
Okay.
Fair enough.
I make a motion to put it on the table for later until we need to do something. We need to address this until which time there's a reason to bring it forward.
I second that.
Further discussion? All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Okay, miscellaneous number 2. Further discussion on possible ordinance prohibiting parking in front of mailboxes.
Last time we discussed, I think we kind of just ran out of time mostly. It seemed
Yes.
like the committee was kind of inclined not to do something official. I recall somebody mentioning that they wanted to see the Madison Ordinance, and that's what we provided. I'm not a huge fan of the Madison Ordinance, largely just because I don't think it really addresses what the real problem here is in trying to do an ordinance to address this, and that's the signage. I don't think Madison actually erects any signage. I don't have any idea how successfully they enforce this, but if we're going to do this and it is a problem, I expect we're going to be enforcing it in the near term, in which case somebody's going to be clever enough to notice that you need appropriate signage in order to do this.
Like it in front of every mailbox?
I think probably so. Unless I guess if there's interest in doing this, what I would suggest we do is having maybe me discussing this a little bit more with Sean Stowski, because what we need to do is take a closer look at the manual on uniform traffic control devices and come up with an opinion on exactly how this would need to be signed under the manual. I've looked it over and it's not crystal clear to me. I've got some ideas, but Sean works with the manual all the time. And then most importantly, once we know what we're comfortable with in terms of what's required for signage, Sean can tell us about how much that's going to cost. Now,
Yeah.
We talked about the idea of basically making people who want this request it and pay for the signage. Or the city does it, but I mean, either way, it's hard to know how big of an issue cost is until we are sure we know what signage is really going to be necessary. But I mean, I suspect it's going to be a sign that is about the same size as our normal no parking signs. Especially the signs that say no parking from here to here, kind of like a dual arrow thing is kind of what I'm.
You're saying that it's not mounted to the mailbox?
Well, that might be one option. It depends on whether it meets the visibility standards. Because the manual describes certain angles and ways the sign has to be positioned so it's visible. If that's possible to do on the mailbox, that might be an option. Obviously, that would impact the cost of the signage. But another thing that we may want to consider, I've been doing some reading, and I don't know if this is something that is best from an alder, or an alder particularly affected, of the area particularly affected, is maybe reaching out to the postmaster and finding out if there's other solutions here. In some places they've got, I forget what they're called, but mailboxes, for a street or block where all the mailboxes are together in one place. Now that's not going to be a solution for some of the couple that we observed over in the Baskerville area, but might be a solution for what's going on over, in Middleton Hills. The other thing too is I've read conflicting evidence too. I mean, apparently this is not supposed to be an excuse. At least I've read one opinion from somebody who wrote a article for the Postal National Letter Carriers Association.
You just haven't had the most recent issue there, huh?
Well, I'm not sure when this, let's see, I don't have a date on this, but the director of education of the National Association of Letter Carriers says, a blocked mailbox is no excuse. You get out of your vehicle and
Yeah.
and deliver.
Hmm.
But I mean, again, I don't know how old this is, and certainly the costs that the Postal Service is dealing with compared to its revenues is becoming an increasingly serious issue. And I don't think they're really approving any more situations where you have letter carriers on foot. Only any new subdivisions are doing that, but it might be worth somebody reaching out to the local postmaster and finding out whether there are other solutions to this that.
I could do that. I wouldn't have a problem with calling around making, and this is Dan's area, so I think that it'd be nice for him to be in on the conversation when we decide how to handle it. So, I'd make a
My only
motion.
other comment on that was the Madison sign was like till 8 p.m., which doesn't seem like it's necessary to go that late.
You would think 4 p.m. would be all
Or
good.
5 the most.
Yeah.
But it just doesn't seem like they cannot deliver the mail. I always thought the mail came whether anything.
I don't know, just
Well,
this week.
it's sleet and snow and hail. I don't remember. There's nothing in the poem that says anything about parked cars in front of the mailbox.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm doing some renovation at my house, and so my dishwasher was sitting out in my front yard, and the cord was over the sidewalk in front of my porch. And I had letters waiting to go, and they did not deliver. They did not pick up because I had a cord in their way.
Really?
Yeah. So they've got their, they've got their parameters, I'm sure, that they could tell you.
Yeah.
So
I'm guessing there's something, or else Madison wouldn't have had to come up with an ordinance for it. So anyhow,
I don't know how old that ordinance is, and I don't really know how successfully it is enforced. It's just what is on their books is all I can.
Yeah. Well, I like the option of somebody putting a sign on their mailbox just saying, please don't park in front of our mailbox. But if there's nothing to back it up, I mean, that doesn't do you any good either. So I'd be happy to call the post office, and we can talk about this at the next meeting again.
Sure.
Okay. Then we skip down to number 4, discussion of downtown parking study. That is going before the Plan Commission tonight, which is probably going on right now. Abby's going to recommend that they accept what the Walker has put forward, and it's short, just a very few spots, and recommending they don't do any additional restaurant downtown so that it would cause more shortages of parking spots. I think this was originally put on because we were talking about ticketing downtown, right?
Yes.
Somebody with a better memory than me, because this is a long time ago.
It's been a number of months, yes. So that's how it did come up as far as kind of what kind of enforcement action, what type of, I guess, how we would enforce it. Is there ever going to be discussion about meters? Is this something that the city wants police officers to focus on? Obviously, Mark Walter. So downtown parking, I can tell you, continues to be something that we do receive complaints on. Mark to focus on it, but we get complaints, and I can tell you, as of day 1 of Forward Dane, we got a complaint about and 2 and 3 and 4. I will tell you.
Of getting, because they were parked and they got a ticket?
2-hour parking. No. A complaint about 2-hour parking violations.
Oh, okay. I'm kind of confused. People were overparked, and somebody complained that they were overparked?
Correct. So we're getting complaints about violations of the 2 hours.
Okay, gotcha. Okay. So I guess when we first had this on here, then do we want to just continue giving out tickets? Is that how we want to?
So enforcement has increased substantially. That was, I don't have any new statistics, but from the time frames through 19 and probably into early 20 compared to the same time frame the year before, ticket numbers had increased significantly for the 12 parking violations. And again, that's based on complaints. The issues we have continue to be whether or not Mark Walter has, he's half-time now and he works Monday through Thursday generally. And because he's only working those 4 hours, he either needs to be able to get out and mark those tires immediately in the morning and then come back, or it becomes a little bit problematic as far as enforcement. So
Yeah.
that his other duties, such as he fingerprints people, he has to do the high school parking, the primary area parking. Those obviously not issues right now, but it pulls him in different directions. And I guess looking for perhaps a recommendation or guidance from the council or LNO as far as what that priority is or what is the long-term solution.
Yeah, I think we're gonna, it needs to continue. I personally, I get calls on it also, and I think it has to be a priority. I mean,
so maybe do we have the money for a couple of part-time jobs for a morning meter maid kind of a person? I mean,
I would guess no.
Yeah, I would guess no as well.
We'll find out tomorrow.
Yeah, exactly. Stay tuned.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess that I was under the impression that changing up the split of the duties wouldn't impact us like it has, but it obviously is making a difference. But I do think that this is something I'm not willing to just say, oh, because otherwise you'll have people parking. Yep.
Yeah, and just the other thing that I brought up in past meetings, was that initially came up, is that the police department does not supervise Mark Walther. It does not supervise anybody. That's a building inspector thing. So we're just kind of looking for guidance, and this doesn't necessarily involve you guys. We had a meeting with Mark earlier this week. I'm sorry. Probably needs to talk to the building inspector and determine what the goals are of that, and if they want to take guidance from the police department, we'll suggest that. He knows that downtown parking is a priority, especially right now.
Okay, good. Yeah. Yeah, this is such a weird time, isn't it? With the, it's just, everything's weird.
Unprecedented, as everybody keeps
Oh, yes, that's such much of it. Okay, very good. Okay,
so you want me to bring that back to review the actual parking study next month?
I guess what we're looking at is how short of parking are we, and if we have to keep enforcing it. I don't know if we need to bring back the parking study to the L&O committee. If we are, I don't think we have to make a motion or anything, but I just would like to see that we do keep enforcing the 2-hour parking. Katie, are you okay with that? Or?
Yeah, that sounds right.
Okay.
Noted.
All right. And if I ever want to talk about it again, I know how to get a hold of you.
Yeah, right. I'll just carry it over month to month.
Yeah. So, all right. And that comes to the end of the agenda.
I will move adjourn.
Second, motion to adjourn. Thank you.
Okay.
Right, thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. Sorry about my hot head.
No. Speak for the animals there.
I'm always going to go to the mattresses for the animals.
Yeah, good for you.
All right. Good night, guys.
Bye-bye, guys. Bye.